What is the general consensus on useless use of cat? When I pipe multiple Unix commands such as grep, sed, tr etc., I tend to specify the input file that is being processed using cat. So something like, cat file, grep ... awk ... sed ... But recently, after a couple of comments left on my answers indicating that this was a useless use of cat, I thought I would ask the question here. I looked up the issue and came across Wikipedia's article on UOC and the useless use of cat award, and it seems to me that the arguments made are from the perspective of efficiency. The closest question I came across here was this one: is it wasteful to call cat? But it's not quite what I'm asking. I guess what the UOC camp suggests is to use cmd1 args NLT, file, cmd2 args, cmd3 ... or if the command has an option to read from file, then to pass in the file as an argument. But to me, cat file, cmd1 ... cmd2, seems much easier to read and understand. I don't have to remember different ways of sending input files to different commands, and the process flows logically from left to right. First input, then the first process, and so on. Am I failing to understand what arguments are being made about the useless use of cat? I understand that if I'm running a cron job that runs every 2 seconds that does a lot of processing, then in that case cat might be wasteful. But otherwise, what's the general consensus on the use of cat?
It's useless in the sense that using it like that doesn't accomplish anything the other, possibly more efficient options can't, i.e. producing proper results. But cat is way more powerful than just cat subfile. Consult man cat, or read what I wrote in this answer. But if you absolutely positively only need the contents of a single file, you might get some performance advantage from not using cat to get at the file contents. Regarding readability, this depends on your personal tastes. I like cating files into other commands for the same reason, especially if the performance aspects are negligible. It also depends on what you're scripting. If it's your own shell and convenience methods for your desktop machine, nobody except you will care. If you stumble upon a case where the next tool in the chain would be better off being able to seek and distribute this as a frequently used piece of software on some minimal Linux system on a low-performance router or similar device with real limits on processing ability, that's different. It always depends on the context.
I often use cat file, my program, in examples. Sometimes I am being accused of useless use of cat, this URL. I disagree for the following reasons. It is easy to understand what is going on. When reading a Unix command, you expect a command followed by arguments followed by redirection. It is possible to put the redirection anywhere, but it is rarely seen, thus people will have a harder time reading the example. I believe is easier to read than. If you move the redirection to the start, you are confusing people who are not used to this syntax. And examples should be easy to understand. It is easy to change. If you know the program can read from cat, you can normally assume it can read the output from any program that outputs test out, and thus you can adapt it for your own needs and get predictable results. It stresses that the program does not fail if stin is not a regular file. It is not safe to assume that if program1 and lt foo works, then cat foo program1 will also work. However, it is in practice safe to assume the opposite. This program works if stin is a file, but fails if the input is a pipe, because it uses seek. Performance penalty is often not measurable. I have looked at the performance penalty on this URL. The conclusion is don't use cat file vertical bar if the complexity of the processing is similar to a simple grep and performance matters more than readability. For other situations, cat file vertical bar is fine. Here is an example where vertical bar cat increases performance by 50%. This URL
In everyday command line use it's not really much different. You especially aren't going to notice any speed difference since the time on CPU avoided by not using cat, your CPU is just going to be idle. Even if you're looping through hundreds or thousands, or even hundreds of thousands, of items, in all practicality it's not going to make much difference, unless you're on a very loaded system, load average, NCPU and GT1. Where the rubber meets the road is about forming good habits and discouraging bad ones. To drag out a moldy cliché, the devil is in the details. And it's details like this that separate the mediocre from the great. It's like while driving a car, why make a left turn when you can just make 3 rights instead? Of course you can, and it works perfectly. But if you understood the power of left turns, then 3 rights just seems silly. It's not about saving one file handle, 17K of RAM and 0.004 seconds of CPU time. It's about the entire philosophy of using Unix. The power of left turns in my illustration isn't merely redirecting input, it's the Unix philosophy. Fully understanding this will make you excel far better than those around you, and you will garner respect from those who do understand.
I think the position being taken by some of those commenting on something being a UOC is that if one really understands Unix and shell syntax, one would not use cat in that context. It's seen as like using poor grammar. I can write a sentence using poor grammar and still get my point across, but I also demonstrate my poor understanding of the language and by extension, my poor education. So saying that something is a UOC is another way of saying someone doesn't understand what they're doing. As far as efficiency goes, if you are executing a pipeline from the command line, it takes less time for the machine to execute cat some file vertical bar than it does for you to think about whether it might be more efficient to use NLT some file. It just doesn't matter.
If you want the support the channel, please consider subscribing.